This is the story of how 70 men with kitchen knives nearly shattered an empire. This is the story of the Third Servile War. It all begins in 73 BCE, in the city of Capua, at a place that was hell on earth, a gladiator school owned by a man named Licinius Crassus. Here, men were treated like animals, caged, and forced to kill for sport. Among them was Spartacus, a Thracian, a former soldier, by some accounts, who had been captured and sold into this brutal life. But unlike the others, Spartacus had a fire that couldn't be extinguished. The plan was desperate and almost laughably simple. Using kitchen knives, cleavers, and cooking spits, about 70 gladiators fought their way out of their prison. Here's where the story gets legendary. On the road out of Capua, they stumbled upon a wagon. Not just any wagon, but one filled with weapons and armor destined for another gladiator school. In an instant, they went from being runaway cooks to a small, well-armed fighting force. They fled to the most defensible place they could find, the crater of the volcano Mount Vesuvius. Rome, at this point, wasn't worried. To them, this was a minor inconvenience, a job for the local fire department, not the army. They sent a praetor named Gaius Claudius Glaber with a militia of about 3,000 men, not trained legions, just raw recruits. Glaber didn't even bother to attack. He simply blocked the only known path down the mountain and waited for hunger and thirst to force the rebels to surrender. He was arrogant. And Rome was about to pay for that arrogance. Here's the crazy part. Spartacus looked at the sheer rock faces of Vesuvius, covered in wild vines, and saw not a cliff but a ladder. He ordered his men to weave the vines into long, sturdy ropes. Under the cover of darkness, they rappelled down the unguarded side of the volcano, silently circled around Glaber's army, and attacked the sleeping Roman camp from the rear. It wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter. The Romans were annihilated. Suddenly, Spartacus wasn't just a runaway. He was a leader, a symbol of hope. Word of his impossible victory spread like wildfire. Slaves from the surrounding countryside, shepherds, runaway servants, and the rural poor flocked to his banner. His force of 70 exploded into an army of tens of thousands. He was joined by other gladiators, Crixus and Enemaus, who became his key lieutenants. This was no longer a band of rebels, it was an army of the dispossessed, and they were armed with captured Roman equipment. Panicked, Rome sent 2 more praetors with 2 more armies. Spartacus's forces, using guerrilla tactics and their superior knowledge of the terrain, defeated them both. His army was now disciplined, battle-hardened, and growing larger by the day, swelling to an estimated 70,000 people. Here's where the plan came in. Spartacus was a brilliant strategist. He knew they couldn't defeat Rome forever. His goal was simple and logical: march the army north, cross the Alps, and let everyone disperse back to their homelands, Thrace, Gaul, Germania, as free people. But this is where the rebellion's fatal flaw emerged: internal division. His second-in-command, Crixus, didn't want to escape. He and his followers wanted revenge. They wanted to stay in Italy, to plunder and burn the Roman towns that had enslaved them. The army split. Crixus took 30,000 men and marched south, while Spartacus continued north. It was a disaster. Rome had finally woken up and sent its real armies, the consular legions. They cornered Crixus and completely destroyed his force. But Spartacus was far from finished. In one of the most stunning displays of generalship in the entire war, he met the 2 consular armies separately and defeated them both in quick succession. He had cleared the path to the Alps. Freedom was within his grasp. And here's the twist, a moment so dark and telling. To avenge Crixus, Spartacus staged his own funeral games. But he didn't use gladiators. He forced 300 captured Roman soldiers to fight to the death in front of his cheering army, a grim reversal of the very spectacle they had escaped. The slave had become the master. For reasons historians still debate to this day, Spartacus then made a fateful decision. Instead of crossing the Alps to safety, he turned his army around and marched south again. By now, Rome was in a full-blown state of emergency. The Republic turned to the one man they thought could solve the problem: Marcus Licinius Crassus. Crassus wasn't a great general, but he was the richest man in Rome, and he was pathologically ambitious. He raised 6 new legions at his own expense and took command. To restore discipline after his army suffered an early defeat, he brought back an ancient and brutal punishment: decimation. He had 500 of his own soldiers beaten to death by their comrades, killing 1 in every 10. The message was clear: you will fear me more than you fear the enemy. Crassus cornered Spartacus in the toe of Italy. In a breathtaking feat of engineering, Crassus's legions built a wall, 37 miles long, coast to coast, complete with a ditch 15 feet wide and 15 feet deep, trapping the entire rebel army. But once again, Spartacus did the impossible. On a stormy winter night, his men filled a section of the ditch with dirt, wood, and the bodies of prisoners and cattle, and broke through Crassus's wall. They were free, but they had suffered heavy losses. The end was near. The Roman Senate, losing faith in Crassus, had recalled two of its greatest generals, Pompey the Great from Spain and Lucullus from the east. The net was closing. Spartacus's army, its discipline breaking down for the last time, refused to retreat further and demanded to turn and face Crassus. In 71 BCE, the final battle was fought. Ancient historians say that Spartacus, knowing all was lost, tried to fight his way through the chaos directly to Crassus, to kill the Roman commander himself. He cut down 2 centurions in his path but was surrounded and overwhelmed. He died fighting, a free man. His body was never identified. The rebellion was crushed. Crassus wanted to make an example that would burn itself into the memory of every slave in the Republic. He took 6,000 survivors and had them crucified. Their crosses lined the Appian Way, the main road from Rome to Capua, for over 100 miles, a grotesque and horrifying monument to Roman power. Pompey, arriving just in time to mop up a few thousand fugitives, shamelessly wrote to the Senate, "Crassus conquered the slaves in battle, but I have torn out the war by its roots, stealing the credit and igniting a bitter rivalry that would shape the future of Rome." In the end, Spartacus lost. But his name became immortal. He was a slave who made the most powerful republic in the world tremble. He was a gladiator who forged an army, a man who gave tens of thousands a brief blazing taste of freedom. He became a symbol, a timeless icon for every rebellion against oppression that would follow. He lost the war, but he won history.